Greetings, beloved creators. I trust you have found our series so far to be full of intriguing ideas. Has it brought up more questions than it has answered? If so, that's okay. Keep in mind that we are touching upon only the most basic of events and situations and offering our perspective on the dance of duality as it has unfolded over millions of years. Some of you have been asking about the Orions and Dracos. We have not gone into detail on these groups because it is not necessary. Suffice to say, our original DNA experiment sort of went astray, to use your earthly language. Other laboratory technicians and inventors came into the lab in the middle of the night and trashed our equipment and stole our samples and did their own experiments on them and started their own laboratories. Do you like our analogy? We have studied your language and customs for a long time and seem to know how to use the vernacular of your time to make our points. The Earth experiment can be best understood, however, if we continue our saga back in time to just after the destruction of Maldek. Over 10 million souls lost their bodies during the destruction of Maldek. Most of these souls took up residence on Mars, where civilization was already in progress. The souls on Mars at that time were a product of our experimentation, along with groups from many different systems, including the Orion and Alpha Draconis. Those groups left their mark many times along your evolutionary spiral, but never to a sufficient degree as to seriously alter your DNA blueprint, at least not yet. The souls from Maldek incarnated in the usual manner through breeding among the Pleiadian, Orion and Draconian lineage of Mars. The civilization on Mars grew significantly in numbers, until there were over 100 million souls. We will not go into the principles of soul fragmentation at this time, but suffice to say, that the 10 million souls from Maldek fragmented into approximately 50% of the Mars population within a period of only a few thousand years. As the population grew on Mars, the fragile atmosphere became strained. Due to their distance from the Sun, both Mars and Maldek had thin and delicate atmospheres that could not take the strain of large populations, not to mention nuclear weapons. As the Mars civilization continued to grow, unrest between the various factions grew, especially since many of the Maldekian souls had not learned the lessons of war and had left their bodies suddenly during the catastrophic events there. Although most souls are counseled in between lifetimes, there was still a policy of non-interference, except to prevent another planetary explosion, and so Mars inhabitants were pretty much left on their own as long as they did not develop weapons sufficient to destroy the entire planet. The explosion of Maldek had altered the orbit of Mars and changed the M-frequency band significantly. The climate changed and great canals were built to transport water from the tropical and polar regions into the desert intermediate zones. As the climate continued to become more unstable, wars broke out over water rights and eventually conventional weapons began proliferating. A form of dirty atomic bombs were developed, using heavy metals, uranium, plutonium, etc., and a war broke out using these weapons. Many souls were warned by members of the Brotherhood of Light, later the Confederation of Planets, and were assisted in building underground shelters and eventually underground cities. The Brotherhood and its related organizations neutralized many of the weapons to prevent a repeat of the Maldek experience. Nevertheless, the Martians blew holes in their atmosphere and severely disrupted the ecological balance to the point of rendering most surface life forms extinct. Some survivors of the atomic bomb blasts made their way underground and joined those already there. Once underground, they continued to rebuild their civilization, until a new level of order emerged. Of the approximately 100 million surface souls, About 10 million survived and went underground. To prevent further attacks, the underground cities of Mars were sealed off from the outside world, and scientists managed to create an artificial environment capable of sustaining up to 20 million souls. Over time, great dust storms spread across the surface of Mars and eroded most of the cities and their architecture. Remaining to this day are a few pyramids and rectangular buildings, enough to remind your scientists that there was once life there, although such information has been suppressed from the populace. As for the underground cities, they still exist and are still inhabited to this day, but have evolved into fourth density and are not visible to most who inquire. Your scientists will discover some radioactivity on Mars that cannot be explained solely by natural rock formations. This is the residue of the atomic explosions, since some of the elements used have a half-life of millions of years. What happened to the 90 million or so souls that did not go underground? You guessed it. They migrated to Earth and reincarnated into the melting pot of Pleiadian, Orion, Draconian and other groups that had reorganized since the destruction of Pan.